Organizational structure in the ITIL framework. So when we talk about organizational structure, what are we really talking about? Well, ITIL doesn't provide us a model for organizational structure. Instead, it just provides us some guidance. So you're not going to be able to open up the ITIL framework documentation and they're not going to have an organizational structure of how you should set up your company. Instead, it just gives us guidance. And the way it does this is in each of the ITIL books, so whether you're looking at the risk management one or the service management one or whichever one it is, if you go to the 6th chapter, you're always going to find it saying organizing for blank, right? And that's organizing for service management, organizing for risk management, organizing for whatever it is, incident response. So the 6th chapter is always going to have that for you. And in that, you're really just going to find a detailed list of the roles and you're going to find the responsibilities. And this detailed list is going to tell you all the people, job functions, and responsibilities that you need to effectively do that part of the ITIL framework. So it's not going to tell you how you should organize them, how you should have management structures. That's all left to your company. Your company has to decide that for yourself. This is just going to provide you some basic guidance so you can figure out how to go moving forward. So who is responsible for what? Well, the roles can be filled by many people, and you have to keep that in mind. A single role can have multiple people who fill it. The other thing is one person can fill multiple roles. So for example, if you're talking about as part of the service management process, the first layer of analyst, the person who takes the phone call, you're going to have lots of people filling that role, right? But if we start looking at something more specialized, we may have one person who can't spend 40 hours filling one role. So instead they'll do 20 hours in one role and 20 hours in another role, and they'll have 2 roles or 3 roles or 4 roles. Especially in smaller companies, multiple roles is very common. Larger organizations tend to specialize and have a single role per person. So if you have many people filling a single role, you have to make sure that there's no gaps and seams. Now what I mean by that is, let's talk about incident response just as an example. If I have an incident response and there's a computer that got infected with a virus, who's responsible for cleaning that up? Well, the customer is responsible for identifying that there was a problem in the first place and calling the service desk. The service desk then has to make a note of that and assign somebody like the field service technician or the remote desktop support to go and fix it. And if it's something really serious, they might have to bring it into their incident handling and their information assurance folks and cybersecurity folks to actually go and investigate it and do reverse engineering of it. So it really depends on who's going to be responsible. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that as we pass things from one role to another role to another role, that there's no gaps and seams, because if there's a gap, things are going to fall through the cracks. And so for instance, if the customer reported it, but the customer service agent who answered the call didn't bother to tell the incident handlers that there was something to do, they're never going to get the job. And so we have to make sure that these things transition from piece to piece to piece. So you always want to make sure that all your roles are filled by somebody, even though some roles can be filled by multiple people. So as we talk about this organization, one of the things that really helps is what's called a RACI matrix. Now RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So these are the 4 things that somebody could be, and sometimes they're more than one. So for example, I have a small example, just a piece of an incident response here. We have the end user and the service desk analyst. They can detect it. That's the responsibility of the end user. And then they have to inform the service desk analyst. Now when we get to logging that incident, who's going to be responsible for that? That's the service desk analyst. Who's going to be consulted? The customer, because they're going to have the details. They're going to tell us the information. We go down to categorizing it. Is the end user really going to be able to categorize the threat? No, but they're going to want to know that their box had an issue and you're going to consult them. Again, that's the responsibility of the service desk analyst to record that and categorize that. And lastly, investigate. So again, the customer is going to be consulted and kept in the loop and said, hey, we took your computer because it had a virus, we're cleaning it up, we're fixing it. The service desk analyst, on the other hand, is responsible for fixing it and investigating it, but they also are informed by the customer. So they have multiple roles there. So that's what we see with that RACI matrix, is that we have this, that each of these roles, and we can look at this across all the different functions and all the different roles, so we can make sure that we understand who is responsible for each. And this helps us identify those gaps and those seams. Now, each activity can have many roles who are responsible, consulted, or informed. As you saw, I had that C/I or that R/I. The service analyst was able to do both the responsibility and the information. Now each activity can have only one role who is accountable though. And the RACI is going to provide the linkages between those roles and responsibilities and accountability, and we can track that using that RACI matrix. It's very helpful in figuring out how this organizational structure is working and if it's efficient.